He spoke on state television in Iran for some time, over an hour, describing his reaction and his thoughts about these the reimposition of these sanctions by the Trump administration. He used an analogy to describe it, saying that if you had stabbed somebody in the back, you wouldn't expect to sit around the negotiating table with them, i.e. he wants to see some kind of trustworthiness, of sincerity, he said, from the Americans before he would be prepared to sit down to try to renegotiate this deal. That is what President Trump has said that he wants to do. He wants to get a much more wide-ranging deal with Iran that doesn't just cover their nuclear program, but also what the Trump administration describes as its malign activity within the region. And until that happens, Donald Trump says he won't sit down with them. But equally, President Rouhani saying, well, hang on, we can't sit down with you while you've just imposed sanctions on us and walked out of a deal that you had signed up to. So yes, President Rouhani very strongly saying that he feels President Trump was trying to cause chaos within Iran and also serve the audience back at home here in the US, his domestic audience, ahead of those midterm elections which will take place in November.
Well, Kate, it sounds like the two sides are pretty far apart here. What is the likelihood that the two leaders could ultimately meet to resolve this issue?
Well, President Rouhani didn't completely discount it, but he did suggest that there was no way really that this could happen while sanctions continued to be imposed on his country and while President Trump had walked away from the JCPOA. He said that if President Trump wanted to sit down, then he would have to readopt the Iran nuclear deal before President Rouhani would be willing to sit down with him. Clearly, that is something that President Trump has said he would not do. And equally, President Trump has said before he would sit down, or certainly members of his administration have said that before President Trump would sit down, that the Iranians would need to show that they were willing to curb their nuclear program and curb this malign activity that the Trump administration accuses them of. President Trump has contradicted his officials somewhat by suggesting that he would be happy to sit down with the Iranians without any preconditions. This is quite typical Trump political play, if you like. He sort of does and says perhaps something different from what the rest of his administration is saying. So, yeah, there's contradictory messages coming out of the White House, but clearly both sides want to see a lot of change before either would consider sitting down with each other.